Let's go.
We're ready?
We're ready.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to Quality Matters. I'm Darcy.
I'm Kyle.
And we have a special episode. Of course, I feel like every episode is not necessarily geared towards quality as people would think of it. This one is a little more out of the box.
A little bit.
In today's global economy, quality matters. Benjamin Franklin once quipped, "The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten." Quality Matters is here to talk about all things quality. So whether you're looking to improve your business, getting ready for an audit, or dealing with failed inspections, tune in, check us out, then get back to doing work that matters.
All right. This is released on Tuesday, July 2nd.
Correct.
And coming up in a couple of days is the 4th of July, also known as Independence Day.
Yes.
And we are very excited about that. We love the 4th of July, as I'm sure most of you do. It's a good excuse to have a party. Our kids love to shoot off the fireworks, and Kyle loves to barbecue. It's one of his favorite things to do.
Yes, but more smoke on the grill. But barbecue is kind of the general term for anything involving the grill.
Right. We're going to get there. Before we get started, because it is Independence Day, we would like to honor the independence of our country by reading just a couple of sentences from the Declaration of Independence, and I think it's the sentences that most everybody knows.
Correct.
If you know any of it. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Kyle likes to pursue happiness through smoking meat on the grill.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we've done a lot of talking around the topic of this episode, but we
Yes.
haven't actually said what today's episode is about. So Kyle really wanted to talk about quality barbecue, or in his case, smoking, and how to make a quality product when you are smoking meat on the grill for others to enjoy.
Yes. So there are a lot of theories and advice you'll hear on the internet, and if they disagree with me, we're just going to assume they're wrong. But no, this is actually something that I have a lot of fun with, and no, there are many right ways to do it. Mine's just better. And Darcy's dying over here.
I'm afraid you're going to run some people off, so let's not be so arrogant.
Confident.
Okay.
So, depends on kind of what you're doing. So, the typical...
So, yeah, let me stop you before you dive into this. I think when most people think about smoking the meat and what creates the quality end product, you think about the rub beforehand.
Yep.
The actual smoking process, which includes lots of things, but among those things, the time and the wood that you use in the smoking, and then at the end, the sauce that you use.
Yes. That's a good way to put it.
Oh, I forgot one in the beginning, too, the quality of the meat that you purchase to smoke. So I think Kyle's going to discuss all four of those things.
Yep.
And offer his opinion on what is the most important. Because we've already discussed this previously. He had some interesting insight. And I really hope, every time I say this, I want people to comment and talk to us about this. So I'm hoping this will start a good argument and get y'all going. All right, Kyle. Let's start with the quality of the meat.
Okay. Quality of the meat is important, but it's not, in my opinion, actually, I don't think any of these by itself are incredibly vital. Anything we're going to talk about, I think you could suffer a little on any one of the four, and we're still going to turn out okay. But the quality of the meat it's simple stuff. You don't want it to be too fatty. You don't want it to be too lean. It's got to be somewhere in between. So say we're doing a brisket. So sometimes the brisket that you get is a trimmed brisket. Maybe they trimmed it a little bit too much. You want about 30% of the mass of your brisket to be fat. And
that helps to make it tender.
It helps to get better heat distribution. contains a lot of moisture that can very quickly leave very lean meat. Because even the lean meat still has moisture, but man, it can just disappear real fast.
So the fat provides more moisture.
And so you're doing ribs, and this is true for pork ribs. This is true for beef ribs. It's almost I think a lot of people know about like the marbleization of the steak, right? That makes a huge difference. So when you look at the ribs, I know that oftentimes they're kind of shrink wrapped in that plastic, and it's hard to see. But take a look, and you just want to see like a little bit of fattiness kind of in between the ribs.
So when you say you're looking for a little bit of fattiness, that's the white.
Correct.
The pink is the good meat that you're going to eat. The white is the fatty that you're looking for to help tenderize your meat.
Yep. And so you just want to look for a little bit there, maybe a little bit on the ends. And that, again, that's just enough to kind of help keep the flavor while you're cooking. But beyond that, there's just thousands of opinions about the quality of the meat. And I'm not saying it's not important, but you could get a C-grade meat and still come out with something that tastes great at the end. Because it's the preparation and the process that gets you the better result at the end, which is really no different than anything we talk about, on every other podcast.
I was about to say, when you think about going through the ISO certification, it's the process. So,
Yep.
All right. So then now we've bought our meat with a little bit of fat on it.
Yep.
And we are going to rub it down.
Yes. So the
I assume you're not giving out your secret rub.
Not everything, just a little bit.
Okay.
Just a little bit. So if you're doing meat, if we're talking about beef or if we're talking about pork, it's just a little bit different, but not a whole lot. Pork tends to need a little extra sweetness and a little bit extra kind of tanginess to it. So that tanginess, you need something that's kind of a little acidic, and so we might talk about that in a minute. But you want to start with probably about as much olive oil as you have the rest of the seasonings and everything else combined. And again, it's that olive oil, what it's going to do is, for one, olive oil just has a great flavor. And I've seen people use butter. I've seen people use lard or even bacon grease. That's really nasty to me, but I've seen people do it.
Again, you're going to run people off.
It's fine. You can do what you want. It's not what I do. But olive oil, it's really light, so you get a little bit of flavor at the end, but it doesn't overpower the meat. Olive oil withstands heat really, really well. There's really virtually no water content in it, whereas, like, say if you use something like a butter or whatever, it's got a high water content in it.
So it's going to evaporate.
Yeah, it's just going to evaporate and boil away, and you're going to be left with kind of just not the best flavor.
Okay.
Not the best texture either. And so the oil is going to do a couple of things. One, it's going to coat the meat so that it actually doesn't get those intense flames or heat or anything like that too terribly. So it's going to kind of make like a little shield around it, honestly, so that it gets that indirect heat, which is really where you get the tenderness from. And then the olive oil, what it's going to do is, if you've got, so we're talking about like half olive oil, maybe half that volume is a mixture of salt and brown sugar. Mm-hmm. They're going to add some black pepper, maybe some garlic, maybe a tiny bit of minced onion, something along those lines. If you like things a little spicier, we'll add a little bit of chili powder in it. Never add something hot like cayenne pepper to it, because for one, those hotter peppers, over a few hours of cooking, their flavor profile really changes, and the heat actually cranks up a lot. So you kind of lose the good, hot, spicy pepper taste, and you're just left with the capsaicin at the end. It's not my preference. And I think most people wouldn't want to eat something that's spicy either.
Right.
So you're gonna want to work with that. And I've tried it before, and I won't try it again. I wanted to try to tenderize the brisket, right? So poke 1,000 holes in it and see if you can get the seasoning to go a little bit deeper into it, and work out real well. We'll end up with a really dry, almost flavorless brisket that I had to bring up hours earlier, which meant it was even tougher and just wasn't very good. So what happens when you do that is you're just creating conduits for the moisture to leave. So yeah, you're probably getting the seasoning deeper into the meat, but you're just creating conduits.
We're not going to poke the holes.
Don't poke holes in it. I've tried before injecting a brisket, kind of like you do a turkey, and I thought, hey, this would be a great idea.
That didn't work out.
It didn't work out very well either. You wound up with just some really uneven flavor profile, and again, it just dried out really, really quickly.
I have to say, as Kyle is discussing this, I'm his wife, so I taste test all of this, and he gets so mad when he's smoking the meat, and he comes, oh, it's not working, I can't get my fire, and I can't get that, and I have to listen to him bitch about it all day long. It's almost not worth it. But he has been through a lot of this,
yes,
and he knows what does and does not work, and there have been so many times that he'll bring the meat in and say, I screwed up, it's not going to be any good, and I taste it and it tastes fine to me. So Kyle giving you all this advice is kind of a big deal because he is a barbecue snob, and he has said this many times before, and when we go out to eat or we're on vacation, I say, I want barbecue, he's always kind of like,
yeah, I don't want anyone else's.
He'll do it because I'm a picky eater and there's not much that I like. I'm not going to go eat Chinese and I'm not going to go eat, this or that or whatever. So he'll come eat it with me, but he'll complain about it because it's not good enough.
But there's 1,000 tips for the rub, though. The three biggest things for the rub is use olive oil, high salt content, high brown sugar content. Everything else is just going to add a little bit of flavor, but you're not going to get a huge benefit out of it.
Okay, but before, when you first started talking about the rub, you said that pork needs something
a little acidic
or tangy. Okay, so what would that be?
That could be a little bit of lemon juice. I wouldn't do lime because it's just too much flavor. And just a little bit of lemon juice. Or my favorite is I'll put a little bit of mustard in there. Now, it makes the rub look kind of gross. It turns the rub kind of a green color. It looks really, really gross.
I have this baby poo image.
Yeah, it's almost that because, especially if you're using like a sea salt or kosher salt and it's like that big old kind of rock salt.
Yeah.
It
kind of ruined the
But it tastes great after it cooks, and that green color goes away pretty shortly. I forget what the membrane is called, but on ribs, there's a membrane on the back of them. And if you're able to peel it off, great. It'll taste a little bit better if you do. If you can't peel it off, the fact is there's no meat directly under it. So you're never going to actually eat it unless you just insist on gnawing on the bone 360 degrees, and it's just kind of odd. So it doesn't make enough difference to get mad if you can't peel that membrane off.
Okay. So once you rub it, you tend to leave it overnight in the fridge and let it marinate. Something
small like ribs, just overnight is good enough. I mean, because it really doesn't take long for that salt to kind of permeate into the meat. And you might think, well, how does it get all the way down there? It's just chemical reactions. It's like the whole ocean is salty. It's not just part of it. Salt just tends to go wherever water is. So overnight is plenty. For something large like a brisket, if you can put it out a couple days in advance, great. That's awesome. So you want to have, 24 to 48 hours on it. If you leave it longer than that, you start running the risk that, the meat could start to spoil.
Yeah.
Even if it's refrigerated and high salt content, I just don't want to take a risk. And
so 2 nights for a brisket, 1 night for ribs.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yep. That'd be good.
Okay. So now we've rubbed it. We've let it sit. And we're going to smoke it.
Yes. So briskets, this one thing I probably should have mentioned about the meat selection is the size matters on briskets. So if you get a real small one, it's going to be done sooner than it can get tender. Whereas if you get something really large, say like 25 pounds or 30 pounds, you're going to have to cook it so stinking long to get the inside tender that the outside is going to start to get dry. So it doesn't work out real well. So about the 18 to 20 pound range is ideal for a brisket, in my opinion.
So even if you're feeding a large group of people, just buy several of the 18 to 20 pound briskets.
Yeah, and you'd have to have a really large group, but yeah.
Yeah, because, that's what we buy because, like he said, it's easiest to cook, or not easiest to cook, but comes out the best. Yeah. And, it's just
we did that
us
for the
and our
church
3
once,
kids.
and there was, a couple hundred people, and
I think we cooked more than one.
No, we did. We cooked
several.
like 5 or 6, and that fed 200
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, the point is, though, it doesn't matter how many people you're feeding. Don't get a bigger one to
No.
make it go further. Stay
just
in
won't
that
taste
18 to 20 pound
Yep.
range and figure out, how many of those you need.
And I think it actually works out kind of well that way, because that almost seems to be the range that people kind of avoid, because they're either like, hey, it's just a few of us, I'm going to get a small one, or it's, hey, we got a bunch of people over, so I'm going to get a big one.
Right.
Kind of works out great all the way around, because if you're late shopping, it may be all that's left.
Yeah.
Ribs, it really doesn't matter, because we're going to talk about those a little bit differently, but that brisket, keep that range right. So when you go to cook it, we want to have it on the heat for at least 10 hours. At least 10 hours.
For
12
the
is
18
good.
to 20 pound brisket.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Would it hurt to do it longer at lower heat? No. But how many of you really want to start smoking it at midnight and stay up all night long? Some people do. That's fine. I don't. I like sleeping better. So that's kind of a good range. For ribs, I'd recommend anywhere from about 3 to 4 hours as well. And I am really particular about my heat, because if you kind of look into the chemistry of the meat, so you've got this salty meat. Well, salty meat, the water in it doesn't boil until about 230 degrees. About between 230 and 250 degrees, depending on the salt content. So if you can keep your heat at about 225 to 230, it'll never boil. And
Why is that significant?
well, once it starts to boil, what happens is the water doesn't exist between the cells. Most of the water exists inside the cells of the meat. So if it boils, those cells are going to rupture. When those cells rupture, a lot of nasty tasting chemicals kind of come out, and they cook in weird ways. And so your meat's dried out. You've got a weird flavor profile. As soon as you see that meat bubbling, well, that's when I get mad.
So yeah,
That's when I get real
that's
mad.
when he comes in and says, "I can't control the fire. It's
Yep.
making me mad."
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
I just hide in the bedroom and let him
Yep.
stomp around and be mad.
This is true. This is true.
So keep the temperature about 225,
Yep. And
that's for ribs and brisket.
yeah, either one.
Okay.
If you're only doing a rack of ribs, you can go up a little bit higher, because it does take a while for the heat to actually transfer. But I wouldn't do much.
Okay, and you're always asking me to get you a particular kind of wood or wood
Yes.
chips.
So there's lots of different types of wood chips out there. I prefer to cook with wood chips, even smoking when I can, because I can control the fuel a lot better, right?
Versus buying logs.
Right, because if you put a log in there and the whole log catches on fire, I mean, all you can do is squirt it with a little squirt gun, which I actually recommend you keep a little squirt gun out there. I have our little flour water can, and if the fire gets too hot, I'll just put a few drops on it and tone it back down. But if you got a log, you're kind of limited in what you can do. Whereas if you got chunks, you just don't put that much in there at a time. And so you can maintain it really well.
So I know there's a lot of varieties to choose from, like apple, mesquite, pecan. What's the difference? What do you prefer and why?
Well, there's two differences between any of them. The flavor and the heat. That's really all you got, is one little bit better flavor, a little bit better heat. So we'll start with oak. Oak is kind of the most generic, bland, and easiest to use. It doesn't have a lot of flavor to it. So if you've got some oak, man, that is perfect to put on like after hour 6 or 7, because you're not adding a whole lot of extra flavor from the smoke at that point. And oak burns really low. It doesn't catch on fire quickly. It's great. Take mesquite, on the other hand. Mesquite adds amazing flavor profile to the meat. I mean, really packs it quick. But mesquite burns hot.
So you got to watch it.
Oh, yeah, you got to watch it, because it'll take off in a minute. And
That's when you're stomping around.
Yeah, it is, yeah. So you'll go out there and you'll look, and it's like 300 degrees, and, you teach your son new words. And
That's great.
And then take applewood, really expensive generally, but it kind of has the same the heat that oak does. Really good flavor to it. It almost adds a sweet flavor to the meat. It's really, really good to cook with. But again, it's kind of expensive. Hickory, on the other hand, has, I guess, one difference, is hickory will add a lot of smoke. So if you're using hickory, you want to use a little bit of it, but try to keep it burning. Because you can add too much smoke to it. And if you add too much smoke to the meat, you literally like get it caked on the outside, and it's not good.
Like you're eating a fire.
Yeah, it's just not very good.
All right. So that's the smoking and the wood chips and which ones to use. Now, I think there's two places that you and a lot of other smokers, meat smokers,
right,
are going to differ. And one is the quality of the meat. I think, there's lots of people out there that think you've got to have a good quality of meat, and you're on the stance that you can buy a crappy piece of meat and make
still
it
get a good product. Yeah.
Yeah. And the last part of it is the sauce.
Yes.
Which I think you differ again
yes,
with a lot of meat smokers, because a lot, and even barbecue eaters, a lot of people say it's all in the sauce.
Right. Well, if it's all in the sauce, why are you going to go to the trouble of cooking anything? Is my
for
question.
a lot of hours. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
why are you
disagree.
gonna
It's
go to all
not
that
all in the
effort?
sauce. So Kyle is a pretty firm believer in it's
Yeah.
not all in the sauce.
It's not.
And this is one thing he does. I know a lot of places make their own sauce, and maybe even a lot of at-home meat smokers make their own barbecue sauce. We don't. And we have tried several store-bought ones. I was on the bandwagon of one particular sauce for a long time because that's what family and friends liked. And I was like, I don't really like it. Why do I keep buying it? So I went back to our standard.
Which we'll tell our standard. I buy plain Jane Kraft barbecue sauce.
It's Kraft original barbecue sauce. It's what we like. And I won't say the name of the other one, but it's a very popular one. And even within Kraft, we've tried different, brown sugar barbecue sauce or mesquite barbecue sauce, but we stick to the original, and it's what we like.
This is why they have those other flavors. So they got the mesquite barbecue sauce because they're trying to get some of the flavor of cooking with the mesquite in there. They got the brown sugar because they're trying to get the flavor of cooking with brown sugar in there.
But it doesn't taste the same when you add it at the end.
Correct.
It's got to be in the rub. It's got to be in the smoking.
Yep.
So at the end, we just use a plain Jane barbecue sauce because the meat itself has enough flavor that we don't need to try to pick out.
But the majority of the flavor comes from the rub and smoking it in proper temperature control. Temperature control is the number one factor, number one success. I mean, you could still have something that tastes good without any rub on it at all if you had good temperature control, because the meat is where most of it really comes from.
Well, I agree. And if you have a tender piece of meat, that makes a huge difference. Flavor or no flavor, and you just put the Kraft barbecue sauce on it, and it's good.
One last tip before we wrap up, because this is something I figured out recently, is it's so frustrating for me when the temperature drops too low, and then I've got to get it back up real quick, right? Like the fire died out, and I'm like, well, how do I get this going again? Never put lighter fluid on it while it's going.
Have you tried that?
Shut up. For one, it makes the meat taste bad, and two, you'll probably lose an eyebrow.
But that's what makes you a good person to talk about this, because you have tried all these things.
So if you've got, you've got the little smoking, the firebox off to the side of your grill, right? So in that firebox, put a rack close to the grill and put some chunks of wood up there. Those chunks of wood will not get hot enough to cook. They will not get hot enough to start smoking, but they will be so hot that they are almost at the ignition temperature. So if you need to get the fire going quick, you grab one of those chunks and put down on the coals, and the fire will catch up real fast. And so it lets you take longer than a 15-minute break from staring at the temperature, because you can recover real quick if you need to.
Gotcha. So that's Kyle's tips.
Yes.
Those are Kyle's tips to smoking meat. We hope you have a happy and safe Independence Day.
Yes.
Enjoy your time with your family and friends.
Don't lose an eyebrow.
Don't lose an eyebrow or a
No
finger
gasoline.
or a toe or anything else with those fireworks.
Got a gasoline story, too.
Okay, we're not going to talk about that. Before we wrap up, lots of ways to get a hold of us, and I hope that we do hear from you with this one. This was a fun one for us. Of course, we're on LinkedIn, Darcy Chambers, Kyle Chambers, Texas Quality Assurance. We're on Facebook. We are newly on Instagram.
Trying to figure it out.
We feel like we're old people and it's for young people.
Yeah.
But we're working on it. I have an Instagram account, QualityMatters Presents, and Kyle is under
Texas Quality Assurance.
That's right. Or you can email us at dchambers@texasqa.com, kchambers@texasqa.com. Of course, catch the podcast, qmcast.com. There is no reason
number
for y'all,
of ways.
There's no reason for us to not hear from you.
Hey, and if you get a chance to try out any of these tips before the 4th or on the 4th, let us know how it went.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And just a little throwback to our tattoo episode. We're still looking to tattoo the boss lady.
Yes.
So, hey, if you're a tattoo artist and you're available.
I am dying to watch Darcy squeal and record it.
I know you are. Woo-hoo. I won't squeal, though, just because you want me to. All right. Before we close, Independence Day is celebrated on July 4th.
Yes.
But before we got ready to record, Kyle said, I think it's interesting to note that we celebrate on July 4th because that's when the Declaration of Independence was signed. However, it was ratified and passed on July 2nd.
Yes.
Which is the date that this episode is going to be released on. So 243 years ago, we decided to become our own free country.
That's awesome.
All right. Thanks for listening, y'all. We hope to hear from you soon.